far as time constraints, each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening and closing statements, 2 minutes to answer each question, with a 1-minute rebuttal for each. Now, at this time, we will begin with opening statements. The winner by coin flip was Mr. George Demos, and he has opted to go first. Senator Lee Zeldin, obviously, you will go second. Mr. Demos, your question. The clock will start when the question is ready.
Well, Jay, thank you so much for hosting this debate into Long Island News Radio, this most important debate about who is going to be the next congressman to replace Tim Bishop. I grew up delivering Newsday. I spent my summers at the Suffolk DA's office in law school, and after that, I went to the United States Securities and Exchange Commission, where I had the privilege and the honor of representing the United States in some of the most high-profile corporate fraud cases our nation's ever seen. That sense of serving the public and being able to give back to our community and hold those accountable who stole from our retirement accounts is what drives me and is motivating me now to run for the United States Congress. I'm the grandson of immigrants. My grandfather, George Demos, came to this country with absolutely nothing in his pocket, but a desire to work hard and live the American dream. And he ended up, it's going to shock you all, at a Greek diner. And he started up working 16 hours a day, 7 days a week, and he ended up owning that diner. That's my family story. That's the American story. That through hard work and opportunity and success, all things are possible. But we're seeing in Washington, D.C., we're losing that. And our country's straying. It's going towards the European model of socialism. Barack Obama is absolutely the wrong president for America, and Tim Bishop is the wrong congressman for Long Island. You know, my wife, Chris, and I, Chris is here today at the debate with us, were blessed about 11 months ago with the birth of our first son, Angelo. And when you hold your baby son, you realize that you're holding the future of America. And you realize how important it is to fight for those principles and values that we believe in. We must have a congressman who will go to Washington and fight for freedom and fight for economic opportunities for all. Long Island is hurting, and the last thing we need in Washington is someone who will go to Washington and defend Obamacare and higher taxes and more government intervention. This debate is about who can defeat Tim Bishop and who can send him packing. I'm the candidate who can do that, and I look forward to being the candidate in November who can once and for all defeat Tim Bishop.
Thank you, Mr. Demos. Senator Lee Zeldin, your opening statement.
I'm proud to be the only candidate in this race Long Islanders know and trust. I'm running for Congress to repeal and replace Obamacare, cut taxes and create jobs, protect our Constitution, freedoms and liberties, and stop Common Core. Born and raised on Long Island, I attended K through 12 in the William Floyd School District. My daughters go to the same school I went to. I own a home and pay property taxes here. I've been involved in hundreds of causes throughout our community. In the state Senate, I've kept my commitments. Repealing the MTA payroll tax for 80% of employers, I sponsored the property tax cap and reduced middle-income tax rates to the lowest level in 60 years. I also eliminated the saltwater fishing license fee and created the PFC Joseph Dwyer program for our vets. I have served our country as a paratrooper in Iraq with the 82nd Airborne and continue to serve as a major in the reserves. My opponent doesn't own a home here, hasn't ever paid a dime of property taxes here. He hasn't earned $1 of income from a job in 4 years. His only alleged claim to fame was that he was an SEC prosecutor. Only problem is he never prosecuted. And to boot, he resigned from the SEC after an IG investigation found that he violated SEC rules by revealing confidential information about a JP Morgan whistleblower who ended up losing his job and getting fired as a result. He is lying about my record on Obamacare and taxes, and all of these lies are bankrolled almost entirely by California Democrats with deep ties to Nancy Pelosi. He even mailed his candidacy papers from San Francisco. You can't trust this guy. Tonight, you will hear more of his lies. This is his 5th attempt at deceit, and he's desperate. He will say anything, do anything, and spend any amount of his California Democratic money to buy a seat in Congress. Instead, you can vote for the Long Island Republican, who is one of us. That's why I'm asking for your vote on Tuesday, June 24th.
Okay. All right, thank you, gentlemen. We are ready to begin the questions. Mr. Demos, I'm going to start with you. Multiple parts to this question. When you're ready to answer, the clock will start. Sir, do you support comprehensive immigration reform? What actions would you take on the illegal immigration problem in America? Do you support a path to earn legal immigration for the 10 to 12 million undocumented immigrants that are now here? If you do not, how do you propose to deal with these 10 to 12 million people? Sir.
Jay, first let me answer your question, and then I'll get to the hateful opening statement that was just leveled by my opponent. First of all, with respect to immigration, I am strongly opposed to amnesty. I believe that our immigration problem has to be fixed, but it's not going to be fixed with having people come across this border illegally and having people flout the law. The fact is, we tried amnesty in the 1980s, and it didn't work. We tried amnesty, and it didn't work. So my question is, if the federal government can find hundreds of federal troops, federal agents, to go into a desert in Nevada and go chase around some cattle, certainly they can find those agents to secure the border. So I am opposed to amnesty. I am opposed to any program that allows people who came here illegally to benefit without paying a price for that. Now, I must take a moment to respond to my opponent's opening statement here. And it's absolutely unbelievable that we're running for Congress and there are all these important issues, and my opponent's going to make his entire campaign about personal attacks. So I want people to notice here that I'm going to focus on the issues, Obamacare, taxes, the issues that matter to the people of the 1st District. I'm not going to hurl personal insults about all sorts of unsubstantiated charges. I'm going to focus on the issues, and I'm going to focus on the record that my opponent has compiled in Albany. It's a terrible record. I understand why he wants to avoid that. The fact is, he went to Albany and he voted for Obamacare. He voted for higher taxes. He voted with Sheldon Silver. He voted with the Democrats. And so the only way to avoid having to talk about his record is to talk about personal attacks. And we can go through them all one by one. But, Lee, it's not the kind of guy you used to be. It's not the kind of guy who's telling you to say these things. I don't know. But this is not the campaign that you should be running. You're better than that, Lee. And frankly, I think you ought to talk about the issues what the people of Long Island want to hear.
Okay. Senator Lee Zeldin, you have 1 minute for the rebuttal.
Well, I'll tell you, money might be able to buy a lot of fancy TV, radio, and mail, but they're not going to buy you your own set of facts. I'm proud of my record up in Albany. There's a reason why the American Conservative Union recognized me as one of 10 rising conservative stars in American politics, and I had the opportunity to speak on the main stage of CPAC this year. With regards to immigration, I don't support amnesty. We do live in a nation of immigrants. Everyone has a great immigrant story within us. But you know what? When you have a leak, the first thing you do, is to turn off the faucet. It's not to take out a mop. The fact is, we have to secure our entry process. Part of it has to do with securing our borders. But there are many ways that people come here. There's also a lot of people who want to come here lawfully and they go back home. We need to allow them to pay taxes. But as far as the pathway of citizenship, I can't support it. And as far as my opponent, he's not going to be able to buy his own facts throughout this campaign or during this debate.
Senator Lee Zeldin, we have your question now.
Do I get 1 minute response?
Well, let's get to the question. I'm going to go quick response.
Sure. No, I would just underscore how important it is that we have an immigration policy that attracts the best and the brightest from around the world. We have PhDs from around the world with engineering and science, and we need those people here. So we have a system that's broken in Washington, and we have to fix that.
Thank you, sir. Senator Zeldin, do you see Common Core as an unfunded mandate? Now, if so, what do you think it will directly cost the taxpayers?
Well, Common Core is an unfunded mandate. It's going to cost about $10 billion nationally to implement on the low end. It's going to cost a lot more than that. I believe in higher standards, but I don't believe Common Core is the answer. There are standards, testing, curriculum, all associated with Common Core. They're set by different people, and nobody's talking to each other. I believe that we need to stop Common Core right now and its associated testing. I'm actually proud to be the one who in Albany introduced the bill to stop it. It's Senate Bill 6604. And it's a bill to stop the Common Core. My daughters are in the 2nd grade right now. I'm seeing it already in their schools. I care about our kids. We want to challenge our kids. We want to have higher standards. But the fact is, Common Core is not the answer. The implementation has been disastrous. And you don't want to throw your kids into the deep end of a pool without a life jacket before they know how to swim. Our kids are not guinea pigs. And the federal government does have a role in Common Core. They were granting waivers and applications, putting out money out there for cash-strapped states in order to get them to sign on to the Common Core because it wouldn't stand alone on its merits. So if we care about improving the quality of education in our schools, it's very important that we take action right now. The federal government plays a role, New York State plays a role, and there's a lot of people who are here actually at LI News Radio who have been leading the effort in New York State, and I'm proud to have their support for our effort, for our campaign. We're going to have a rally up in Albany in just a few weeks. We're up to 11 co-sponsors. We've been working on this for a long time. My opponent actually, for the first time just a couple weeks ago, weighed in on Common Core. You know why? Because it polls well. That's what he does. I've never supported Obamacare. I never raised taxes 104 times like he claims. He's not saying it because it's true. He's saying it because it polls well. And he's trying to win votes. He's trying to buy himself a seat in Congress on the east end of Long Island. We're going to see through that.
Mr. George Demos, sir, your rebuttal.
Lee, I'm absolutely trying to win the votes of the conservatives and the Republicans across the 1st District, and we're going to do it on the issues, not on the personal attacks. With respect to Common Core, I absolutely did put up a television commercial because it's so important that we have education controlled at the local level. The fact is that Common Core is an example of what happened in Albany. Why do we have Common Core in the first place? Because we had New York State accept $700 million in federal grant money. And what happens? When we accept the federal money, then the federal strings come attached. We don't need control from Washington on education. We need control at the local level. I am for repealing Common Core. So it's all well and good that Lee is going to introduce a bill to get rid of it, but why did this happen in the first place? Why do Albany politicians continually go along, accept these federal grants, and then they're always shocked when the federal government ruins everything? The federal government isn't here to run Long Island, and I intend to return education power to the people of Long Island.
Mr. Demos, your question, sir. If in Congress, would you propose a no-strike law for teachers?
Well, I think education should be handled at the local level, and I think that public unions who strike do a great disservice to the American people. We also see it in the federal government where unions hold our taxpayers hostage. What they do is they have these high salaries, and they never can leave, and they never can be held accountable, and they can't be held accountable. So my mother was a public school teacher. She taught in Harlem for many years, and she did so because she cared about the students. She cared about education, and she cared about the future of our country. I care about the future of our country. I care about the schools that my son Angelo will go to, and it's so important that education be controlled at the local level, and that means you can't have teachers, the few bad apples, hold the rest of us hostage. So I absolutely will push for any legislation that makes sure that education is controlled at the local level and that teachers' unions do not control our education process. You know, it's so important that we have a candidate who's not part of the Albany establishment, who's not part of the liberal go-along-to-get-along crowd in Albany. This entire debate is about who is going to defeat Tim Bishop. And there's only one candidate at this table who's already lost to Tim Bishop. In fact, he got trounced by Tim Bishop. So we need to have a conservative Republican who can stand up for our principles in Washington, not someone controlled by the Democratic lobbyists in Albany, not someone who went up there and went with the crowd. I would have been up there and stood up against some of those liberal Republicans who voted for the state budget, who voted for Obamacare, who voted for higher taxes. It's absolutely unbelievable that we have Republicans, our own party in Albany, doing the wrong thing. New York was recently ranked number 48 in the nation for job creation and for tax environment, and that's directly because of Albany. I will be the conservative candidate who can stand up and defend our principles of freedom and opportunity for all, and that certainly includes education.
Senator Lee Zeldin, your rebuttal, sir.
Well, first to answer the question, I wouldn't support that. I think that we have a lot of teachers here who are doing a good job educating my daughters. They're in the 2nd grade now. I have twins, kindergarten, 1st grade, 2nd grade. We were very fortunate to have a half a dozen great teachers supporting them. With regards to listening to my opponent's answer to that question, though, it sounds like he's running for state assembly or something. If you want to go to Albany, I don't even know if you've ever been to Albany, but if you have all of a sudden this interest in getting involved in the process, I've actually asked wherever I go, door to door, all throughout the district. No one's ever seen you participate in any type of community event. And the fact is, your only connection to Long Island is the Midtown Tunnel. Long Islanders see through that. They want someone who they know and who they trust. And the fact is, I went through public education here. You went to private school, Trinity School in Manhattan. I know what's best for public education, sir.
Thank you, sir. Senator Lee Zeldin, your next question. The Department of Veteran Affairs Inspector General's office said late Tuesday that 26 facilities were being investigated nationwide over allegations of manipulated wasting times and other issues. What actions would you tackle to make sure our veterans get the attention they need? And who do you place blame on for the actions?
Well, I'm proud to still serve today as a major in the Army Reserves, serving alongside some great Americans, men and women who before me were willing to lay down everything in protection of our freedoms and liberties. When they come home, sometimes they don't come home in one piece. They come home with the physical and mental wounds of war. They're entitled to a standard of care at our VA, which we are failing them as a nation. And the fact is, whether it is secret wait lists where we have veterans dying, if it's hundreds of thousands of disability claims not getting processed because we have a VA director who's refusing to switch his system from paper to computer. He's been there for years. There's a reason why I asked VA Director Eric Shinseki to resign. I believe he needs to be replaced. There are people who are giving him really bad advice, and they need to go as well. Our veterans deserve it. One veteran who we lose on a secret wait list is too much. In Albany, I created, and I know that my opponent really likes to make it seem like I didn't have all these great successes in Albany. I'm proud of the PFC Joseph Dwyer program, which I created. Started in 4 counties, expanded to 11, now it's in 12, to provide peer support for our veterans with post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. Our vets are coming home. They look like they are in one piece, but they come home to a family, friends, people at work who don't understand what they're going through. They feel isolated and alone, and they end up losing their battle to post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury. New York State, local counties, all the great veterans and patriots who are here supporting us at this debate today, we are all stepping up because there's a vacuum of leadership in Washington, and it starts at the top. This president, he wants to say he's madder than hell now. If you want to hold people accountable, you need to replace a whole lot of people at the top of the VA and give our veterans the standard of care that they've earned, protecting our freedoms and liberties.
All right, thank you, Senator. Mr. George Demos, sir, your rebuttal on that.
I absolutely agree that Eric Shinseki should have been fired. I also think that Eric Holder should have been fired for Fast and Furious. I think that Kathleen Sibilia should have been fired. And I also think that Hillary Clinton should have been fired for that handling of Benghazi. The fact of the matter is that we need to have a conservative Republican who will stand up and fight the Obama administration. But what we're seeing in the VA system is exactly what we're going to see in the United States with Obamacare. This is what's going to happen down the road. Long lines, waits, the unacceptable, ridiculous problems that are happening with the VA system will happen with health care. And let me repeat once again, my opponent went to Albany and he voted to implement Obamacare in New York State. That vote happened on March 27th, 2013, and he voted. He didn't have to do it, but he voted for that bill. And the fact is that our Assemblyman Al Graf, Michael Fitzpatrick, and Mr. Palumbo all voted no. Mr. Zeldin voted yes, and that's wrong.
Senator Zeldin, a quick response.
You know what's amazing is that we get a question about what are we going to do for our veterans. I get 2 minutes. I wish I had 5 minutes or 10 minutes or a half hour to talk about our veterans. But he's able to finish talking about our veterans in about 4.5 seconds and go on attack again, lying about my record about Obamacare. You know, it's unbelievable. It really speaks volumes. You're saying I'm not conservative? I'm giving what is not conservative about my answer
Senator.
about our veterans and my service.
Senator, we have to move on.
Interject for 15
I'm going to go to
seconds.
Mr. George Demos with the next question.
The notion that I don't care about
Sir,
our veterans is absolutely unbelievable.
Mr.
for you to
Demos,
suggest that, sir.
Mr. Demos, your question. Emergency unemployment compensation expired in December. In addition, pending legislation that would renew federal jobless benefits expires on May the 31st, which means that time is running out to extend it. Where do you stand on long-term unemployment benefits?
The fact of the matter is that we need to have conservative principles. We need economic growth. Economic growth is the answer to the lack of jobs. And the fact is the Obama administration has been doing absolutely everything they can to ruin this economy. Barack Obama was handed a bad economy and he made it worse. And Tim Bishop has been doing even worse. And this debate is about defeating Tim Bishop. I do not believe that we can have unemployment continue on and on and on. We need economic growth. We need to have people with conviction and character stand up. I want to go back to that last question because Lee made an absolutely unbelievable accusation here. He says that I only spent 4.5 seconds caring about our veterans. I honor our veterans. I salute them. I salute you for your service. So let's not turn this into a political circus. The fact of the matter is that what I said, if you listen, was that the VA system is what's going to happen to our healthcare system in the nation. Let me say that again. Our VA system is what's going to happen to the rest of our Obamacare healthcare system. Now, Lee will dance around. He'll tell you that he's a conservative, but votes matter. The fact is there was a vote in Albany on March 27th, 2013. He could have voted no. He voted yes. So all these things we're going to dance around. He won't answer why he voted no. 34 states said no to having an Obamacare state exchange. 34 states had the courage to say no. But New York State went right along with Andrew Cuomo and said yes. We need people of conviction and character who are going to stand up and defend our conservative principles. So, yes, I believe in economic freedom, and the ultimate answer of this debate is that we need to defeat Tim Bishop. Tim Bishop has to go, and we have to ask ourselves, who is the candidate who will stand up to Tim Bishop once and for all? He's been there for 12 years. He has to go.
Thank you. Senator Zeldin, your response.
I thought the question was about unemployment insurance. I don't even know if he even said unemployment insurance in his answer. The fact is we have people who are struggling. We have a problem with people who are unemployed. We have a problem with people who are underemployed. We have to create more jobs here on Long Island. We also have to find ways to reduce our cost of living. We have people who are trying to find a job. And we need to, with our compassion for those neighbors, to try to help them get on their feet, to pay their bills so that they don't foreclose on their homes, for those who own a home locally, for people who we don't want them to default on their credit cards. We want them to be able to take care of their family. And some people need a helping hand. Unemployment insurance is one way that we can give them a start. But the fact is we need to create more good-paying jobs here locally. This was a question about unemployment insurance, right?
Correct.
Okay, just wanted to check.
Senator Lee Zeldin, your next question. Prince Charles made a recent comparison to Vladimir Putin to Adolf Hitler. The statement comes at a delicate time as many world leaders remain critical of Putin's seizure of Crimea. What are your thoughts of his comparison, and what are your thoughts to Putin himself and our country's stance on him?
Well, I think that Vladimir Putin looks at Alexander the Great and he says, I want to be Vladimir the Great. He wants to annex neighbors. This guy has a certain sense of himself, which is very dangerous to American interests abroad and for world stability. I think it's outrageous that he decides he just wants to annex the Ukraine. And this president, who has had inconsistent leadership with his foreign policy, whether it's Benghazi, which he needs to get held accountable for, and I'm happy that there's now a select committee on. Whether it's Iran, he's saying that there's a particular deal that's going to make Iran stop pursuing uranium enrichment. But Iran president and their leadership is automatically refuting that and saying it's not true. So what kind of a deal really is that? And it's really a testament to this president's horrific foreign policy. With regards to the Ukraine, I don't think it's any coincidence that just days after the Pentagon announces that they're going to reduce troop strength to the lowest level since 1940, days later the president goes into the Ukraine. Now, thinking way outside the box, what can we do? Look at the Keystone Pipeline. Look at our own resources that we have that we can tap into that will allow us to be energy independent. Russia benefits from the U.S. relying on Russia and that region, their allies, in order to sustain ourselves. We're here in this studio, Long Island MacArthur Airport. There are a whole lot of lights on. We're all going to leave here. We're going to get in our cars and we're going to drive away. And the fact that we don't tap into our own resources, whether it's hydraulic fracking in the state of New York, which can be done responsibly and safely, or it's cutting through all that bureaucratic red tape in Washington to pursue the Keystone Pipeline. I believe that we can become more economically independent, and that is one way that for this president of Russia who wants to be Vladimir the Great, to be a little bit weakened in the world and once again respect us. It might take a new president to do it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. George Demos, your response.
Oh, I absolutely agree that we need a new president to make sure that America is respected around the world. You know, we don't have a foreign policy now. We have a President, Barack Obama, who has absolutely no idea what he's doing. We need leadership. And what's happening with Vladimir Putin is an example of what happens in a vacuum of leadership. He moved into the Ukraine because he can. He can do so because he can extort them because of their economic energy resources. The fact is we do need to build that Keystone Pipeline, and Tim Bishop voted against it. We need to have energy independence and get that energy from our clean energy from Canada, our neighbor to the north. We need to make sure we focus on getting energy from fracking. We need to make sure we focus on getting energy here in America so that Vladimir Putin doesn't use that as an excuse to take over his neighbors. But I agree with Lee on this one. Barack Obama has to go, and Tim Bishop, who sits there voting with him, has to go. We don't have a foreign policy. It's time we have leadership in Washington, D.C., and I will be the candidate who will make sure to go to Washington to push that.
Gentlemen, this will be the last question before our first break. Mr. Demos, your question. According to statistics, there are 16 million people who now have health care that did not since the Affordable Health Care Act was passed. In your ads, you mentioned on your priority list is to repeal it. Now, if you were successful in this, what would you say to the families that went from having health care coverage due to the Affordable Health Care Act to not having health care coverage?
The fact is those statistics are all cooked books by the Barack Obama administration. Yes, people signed up, but how about the people who lost their health insurance because of Barack Obama? Millions and millions of Americans have lost their health insurance and are now being forced into this plan. The fact is Obamacare isn't working. It's a national disaster. Stony Brook University, the biggest health provider in our district, announced recently that it wasn't going to take any Obamacare plans. So the Obama administration continually cooks the books. If you look at them, they'll tell us that unemployment's probably at 4%. We look around Long Island and we know that's not true. But that's the central issue of this campaign. I am absolutely for repealing Obamacare. And the fact is that New York State has Obamacare in place with a state exchange because the Albany State Senate voted to implement this. They voted to fund it. They didn't have to take that funding for the federal government, but they did. Lee Zeldin went to Albany twice. He voted on March 27th, 2013, and on March 31st, 2014, to implement Obamacare. There was actually a great exchange on the floor of the Assembly where Assemblyman Al Graff went back and forth with Democrat liberal Denny Farrell, and they discussed the very funding that's in that bill about Obamacare in the state budget. There was also Assemblyman Kieran Lawler from upstate New York who was on tape saying the reason he was voting against the budget was because it contained funding for Obamacare. So I think we need people of conviction and character who would stand up and take a stand. Lee, you didn't have to go along with the Albany herd. Lee, you didn't have to go along to get along. You didn't have to do what your Albany lobbyist buddies told you to do. You could have taken a stand. You could have been the one candidate who said enough is enough. So it's time that we repeal Obamacare. It's time that we repeal the New York State Exchange. And it's time that we focus on sensible reforms for fixing health care, like portability across state lines, tort reform, and making sure you can carry health care between jobs. These are sensible reforms, not Obamacare.
Senator Zeldin, your response, 60 seconds.
So you just said that we have a state exchange because of some vote in the New York State Senate. And I would actually challenge you, I mean, maybe it's not too late for you to actually do some research, and you'll realize that in April of 2012, Governor Cuomo unilaterally, via executive order, created a state exchange. Why? It's very well documented if you read the stories. He did it because the Senate Republicans refused to bring the bill to the floor for a vote. And you mentioned Assemblyman Graff and Assemblyman Lawler, and maybe now is a perfect time to say I'm very proud of having their endorsement. I wonder why they are endorsing me and 60 other local elected officials in all 8 towns of the 1st Congressional District. I've never supported Obamacare. I never will. The U.S. Congress funded Obamacare, not the New York State Legislature. Obamacare's in all 50 states. We could pass a bill in Albany that says no Obamacare. We'd still have it.
Jay, may I get 30
Quick
seconds to respond
response,
to that?
15 seconds, sir.
Absolutely, sir. The fact is, I have no doubt that they all support you. The entire political boss structure is supporting you. Governor Cuomo put it in by executive order, but you didn't have to fund it. In Rhode Island, the governor tried the same thing, but the state legislature sued the governor in Rhode Island to prevent it.
Thank you, Mr. Demos. We will take our first break. This is the Republican primary debate. We'll be back after these words.
When I get home
and hang up my uniform,
my job isn't over.
and my work isn't done.
I'm not just
The Suffolk cop. I'm more than just a
Suffolk police officer.
I'm a member
of the Suffolk PBA.
We're proud to keep Suffolk with the lowest violent crime of any suburb.
And when an emergency strikes, we're at the scene.
But as Suffolk PBA members, we don't need to be in danger to step up for our community.
With the Suffolk PBA, we're never off duty, and we're always there for our neighbors.
That's the Suffolk PBA. The PBA hosts workshops to help prevent bullying, stop drunk driving, and keep our homes safe. The PBA even teaches families how to avoid drugs and give free self-defense classes. They're keeping us safe. But behind their shield, they're never off duty, keeping our communities safe and continuing to make Suffolk a great place to live and raise a family. The Suffolk PBA, protection benefiting all.
Westbury Toyota has expanded their dealership for a more luxurious customer experience. We treat our customers like family. The home of the 2014 .5 Camry LE with backup camera. Drive away with one now and also check out deals on all other in-stock vehicles available now at the same low cost as the dealer. Call or visit Westbury Toyota for this Memorial Day special celebration. Only $7,000 and that includes your taxes. That's only $7,000 with backup camera and your taxes included on the 2014 .5 Camry LE. Call 877-403-9970 to reserve your 2014 .5 Camry LE today. This offer is so good, I'm telling you twice. Call or stop in now for this unbelievable offer from Westbury Toyota. The new showroom is open and luxurious. Come by now and be the first ones to drive off in a 2014 .5 Camry LE with backup camera. Only $7,000, taxes included. 877-403-9970. Stop in and become a part of the Westbury Toyota family.
Have you ever had a bad hair day? I'm Dr. Keith Durante, and I'm here to tell you that hair matters. Hair matters a lot. There's no reason to have a bad hair day, sport an unappealing hairpiece, or worse, a bad hair transplant. Practicing surgery for over 30 years, I've seen technology evolve, including in hair transplant procedures. For years, patients have asked me about hair restoration, but until Neograph, there wasn't one refined enough to add into my practice. It's a revolutionary technique without cutting, sutures, staples, long linear scars, or obvious ugly plugs, and unequivocally is the best in hair transplantation for men and women. Whether you have diffuse thinning, an obvious bald spot, or even just a scar that's bothering you, we can correct it and have you back to work in days. It would be my privilege to see you, and the consultation is free. Visit us at LongIslandNeograph.com or call Michelle at 631-620-2020. Don't wait any longer. Life is too short for bad hair days.
Atlantic Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram says, why wait? Cash in on up to $14,000 in Memorial Day savings now. Or get payments starting at just $89 on cars, $99 on Jeep, and $109 on Ram trucks. We'll even help you out of your current contract early. So why wait? Cash in now at Atlantic Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram during the Dodge 100-year event and Ram commercial truck season. Get details at AtlanticCJDR.com or 1-800-NEXT-RIDE.
A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder is Broadway's Tony-nominated best musical that the New York Times calls a rare breed, a true musical comedy that is both funny and rewarding. The Hollywood Reporter cheers, it restores our faith in musical comedy. Entertainment Weekly calls Gentleman's Guide fresh and ingenious, and NPR cheers, it's something we don't really see on Broadway anymore. A Gentleman's Guide to Love and Murder, nominated for 10 Tony Awards including Best Musical. Visit agentleman'sguidebroadway.com.
Do you want to look hot on the beach this summer? Then it's time to consult with board-certified plastic surgeon Dr. Stephen Greenberg. Dr. Greenberg was voted the best cosmetic surgeon on Long Island for 2014. Dr. Greenberg specializes in the 24-hour rapid recovery mini-incision breast augmentation, the popular mommy makeover, liposuction, tummy tucks, rhinoplasty, and many male procedures to get your body looking the way you desire. Dr. Greenberg is sought after by media. He is is known all over the media and news as the go-to doctor. Now also located in Southampton in addition to Woodbury and Manhattan. Many different financing options available. Call 631-287-4999 or visit GreenbergCosmeticSurgery.com. Summer is almost here, and before you know, it's going to be hot, hot, hot. So call Dr. Greenberg and book your complimentary consultation so you can have that summer body you've always wanted. 631-287-4999.
Questions. Senator Lee Zeldin. This is a listener question. It's from Jeff in East Islip. He says, our Second Amendment rights have been under attack in New York, and the Republican leadership has been part of it. Peter King is no friend to our Second Amendment. How will either of you protect our Second Amendment rights nationally? How can you persuade Republicans in New York to stand up for them too?
Well, I'm proud to have opposed the New York SAFE Act. I co-sponsor the bill to repeal it. I've spoken up at rallies, issued statements. I've been very active on the issue. I have a lot of respect for our Second Amendment and law-abiding citizens. I'm actually the only person south of the Hudson Valley who opposed the SAFE Act. I think that we need more people to represent our law-abiding citizens here on the East End and all throughout our country. And I take my oath that I take to the Constitution very seriously, whether it's my oath as an officer in the United States military or my oath as a New York State senator. There is some information that my opponent put out, and he's trying to really get some extra legs on it. And I just want to get ahead of it before he even tries to spin this one the wrong way. So there was we actually were successful up in Albany in eliminating a funding appropriation for the SAFE Act. The governor has indicated that he is going to pull money out of one of the pots that he controls in order to fund the SAFE Act. I think that it's reprehensible that he does it. He has control over certain pots of money. I've been very outspoken in my criticism of him, of wanting to pull money out of other pots in order to fund the SAFE Act. I think it's unconstitutional. If you look at the D.C. versus Heller decision of the United States Supreme Court, they overturned the D.C. handgun ban because it overturned the entire classification of firearms commonly used by law-abiding citizens. It's essentially what the SAFE Act does as well. The way that they define assault weapons, you take a weapon that is perfectly legal, and by adding a pistol grip or a flash suppressor or a muzzle compressor or a collapsible buttstock, all of a sudden they say it looks scary and that should be illegal. I believe the U.S. Supreme Court should overturn the SAFE Act. There was a district court in Western New York that already overturned the 7-round clip limit, the magazine limit, and I'm happy that they did that. I'm proud to have the support of John Cushman, National Board of Directors here, a constituent from Patchogue, and I'll continue to advocate for our law-abiding citizens. Thank you, Senator Zeldin. Mr. George Demos, sir, your response. 60 seconds.
Well, I'm a constitutional conservative. I believe what the Constitution says what it means and means what it says. And the Second Amendment means that people have the right to defend themselves. And it means it's not about hunting, it's about personal liberty. I'll never forget that moment watching when I was a boy, the Los Angeles riots, when a single Korean grocery store owner held back an angry mob with a single firearm and saved his American dream. But once again, in Albany, they went along and went along with the SAFE Act. Mr. Zeldin tried to preemptively say what I was going to say, but let me look at the facts. On May 6th, the New York Post, not me, the New York Post ran an article about how there was funding for the SAFE Act in this year's budget. And the state senators, either they didn't read the bill. Lee, I don't know if you read the bills before you vote on them, but it was in there, and he voted for it. And Assemblyman Kieran Lawler, and I know he endorsed you, all you guys endorse each other, but the fact is he said beforehand that he was voting against it because it contained funding for the SAFE Act. The devil's always in the details, Lee.
Mr. Demos, your next question. You want a response? Quick response, 15 seconds.
Yes, I think it would be great if you were able to show us what the page and line number is of the New York State budget that funds the SAFE Act. Well, can you tell me right now? Are you aware? I mean, you're saying I didn't read the bill, which I did. You obviously did.
Sir, we're going to head to the next question.
If you looked at the state budget, you would have realized.
Mr. Demos, thank you, Senator. Mr. Demos, your next question. The Violence Against Women Act provides funds toward investigation and prosecution of violent crimes against women, imposes automatic and mandatory restitution of those convicted. Would you have voted yes no, or present on the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act? And explain.
Well, I'm a law enforcement background, and it's important that we always defend the law and make sure that we have people of conviction and character who are going to go to Washington and enforce the law. As a former SEC prosecutor, I enforce the law against corporate criminals, and I absolutely believe that we should enforce the laws against people who do any violence, especially to those most vulnerable in our society. So certainly the Violence Against Women Act is an act that does the right thing, and we have to make sure we defend that. The fact of the matter is that Lee just said before that he challenged me to point to the line number. The fact is that the New York Post, that's not a liberal publication, Lee, is it? The fact is the New York Post said that several Republicans were upset about the SAFE Act funding. It's in there. The fact is that Assemblyman Lawler said in a video before he was voting against it because it had funding for the SAFE Act, Lee. Come on, Lee. Are you saying that Mr. Lawler wasn't telling the truth? The fact is that we have to read the legislation in Albany, and that's the problem with my opponent. He goes to Albany. There are two Lee Zeldins. There's the guy on Long Island, and there's the one in Albany who votes for higher taxes, votes for Obamacare, votes for the SAFE Act, and votes for all of these programs. We need someone of conviction and character who will be that lone vote and be the leader and say no and say enough is enough. I'll never forget Governor Pataki, who's endorsed our campaign for Congress, was telling me that back in 1994, there was only one state senator who voted against the budget. Only one. And he was ostracized, he was vilified, and he was told he had no future in the party. And the people rewarded that man by making him the governor of New York. I'm proud Governor Pataki's endorsed our campaign, and I wish you'd displayed the same amount of fortitude in Albany and said, no, I will be the person who votes no to these things. So I will be that kind of conservative in Washington. We don't need someone else to follow John Boehner and the rest of that crowd in Albany that's doing absolutely the wrong thing. I will be a conservative in Washington.
Senator Zeldin, your response, 60 seconds.
Maybe we just figured it all out here, saying that John Boehner is up in Albany. And again, Obamacare is in Washington. Passed in Washington, funded by Washington, not funded by Albany. You say we created 104 new taxes up in Albany. 100% untrue, but it polls well, so that's your strategy. Say whatever you can because you're desperate. It's your fifth time running for office. You're here saying you're an SEC prosecutor. Now, everyone at home, if you want to go to the federal court system online, it's called PACER, P-A-C-E-R, and you can actually search for every criminal case in the entire court system. And George Demos's name doesn't come up once. I was a prosecutor. I prosecute over 100 times. You say you're a prosecutor, you didn't process once.
Jay, may I just respond to
Quick
some moment
response,
to that?
15
Absolutely.
seconds.
These personal attacks that you're making are absolutely unbelievable. I've been endorsed by the former Attorney General of the United States, Michael Mukasey himself, the nation's highest law enforcement officer. I've been endorsed by Mayor Rudy Giuliani, America's mayor himself. Absolutely, I was at the FCC prosecuting corporate fraud, and your campaign is really desperately if that's what you're resorting to.
Senator Lee Zeldin, your next question, sir. Congressman Bishop and Senator Chuck Schumer, they continue to lead the effort regarding Sandy Beach nourishment dollars to Long Island. Now, some have complained that it's taking too long. What would you have done differently than Bishop and Schumer has done as far as to expedite the process?
Our congressman has completely failed. One thing I'll point to is the Fire Island to Montauk Point plan, the FIMP plan. All across Fire Island, we have projects that haven't even gotten started. They haven't even gotten off the ground. Meanwhile, by the first Memorial Day after Sandy, Jones Beach had new roads. They had new dunes. Staten Island, Queens, Brooklyn, Jersey, everyone was getting their funding to not just rebuild, but to come back stronger than they were before. And this entire time, this congressman has produced nothing. As timetables get pushed back, it's one excuse after another. I think that we have bureaucrats down in Washington who care more about the piping plover than they do about the people on the south shore of Long Island who are desperate to rebuild. Their lives haven't restarted after Superstorm Sandy. Look just south of Mastic Beach, where there were dunes, and now there are none. You go all the way out to Montauk Point, where the projects are getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and all we get are excuses from the federal government. Our congressman needs to step up right now with some courage. He's actually very fortunate that last year wasn't a rough hurricane season, because we would have gotten decimated all across Fire Island. We need someone to represent us down in Washington, someone who's from here, someone who actually owns a home here. I live in Shirley. I'm proud to have grown up in Shirley. I went through kindergarten through 12th grade in Shirley in the William Floyd School District. My daughters go to the same school I went to. Superstorm Sandy, I live literally hundreds of feet away from the bay down in Shirley. And I have a lot of neighbors who are really concerned about the fact that our congressman hasn't stepped up. We need to elect someone who is from here, who understands these needs. Quite honestly, I don't even know if my opponent knew what FIP stood for before he showed up at this debate.
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Demos, your response, sir. 60 seconds.
Well, Tim Bishop has been an absolute disaster of a congressman, and we all agree on that. But this debate, Jay, is about who is going to defeat Tim Bishop. Tim Bishop has to go. Tim Bishop is the one who has been sitting there time after time getting reelected because we have the political clubhouse bosses nominate someone else from their clubhouse to stand and to lose. I absolutely believe that we have to protect our shorelines and we have to get that funding and we have to make sure there isn't waste, so much waste, fraud, and abuse in our government, and that funding doesn't get to where it needs to go. So I absolutely believe that we have to push for that. But the fact of the matter is that we need to have a congressman who stands up for us and stands up for our principles of economic liberty and freedom. And the fact is that we need to defeat Tim Bishop, and we're not going to do that with a go-along-to-get-along guy from Albany who went along with his Democratic lobbyist friends, who held a fundraiser in Albany with his lobbyist friends. I am focused on the issues in this campaign. I am focused on defeating Tim Bishop. He has to go. He's been there for 12 years, and we're not going to beat him by doing the same thing again and again.
Senator Zeldin, quick 15 response.
First off, the question was about Superstorm Sandy. I mean, just you got to listen to the questions as they're asked. As far as party bosses, I don't think that Assemblyman Mike Fitzpatrick or Supervisor Ed Romaine or Lori Zaneski or Scott Russell or Terry Kiernan or Tom Noble.
Senator, I'm going to have to stop you.
We have 60 local elected officials who are endorsing us.
Sir, we have to move on.
They're not party bosses.
Mr. George Demos, your next question. When Senator Zeldin spoke to at the Conservative Political Action Conference, also referred to as the CPAC, the senator called for abolishment of the IRS. Do you agree with that? If so, what would your plan be for generating revenue without the IRS? Sir.
I agree. The IRS needs to go. We have a heavy-handed system in Washington, D.C., where we have bureaucrats who are busy doing political work in the name of our tax enforcement. You had employees, and Barack Obama said that, oh, there wasn't even a smidgen of corruption. You have an IRS that is corrupt from top to bottom. They are busy prosecuting conservatives and auditing conservatives. They are selectively prosecuting those people, and that is wrong. So I absolutely agree that we need to have a streamlined system, and we can start by moving towards a flatter and fairer tax system. When you have a tax code that is so complex and so convoluted, it means that no one could possibly comply. And you know what that means? It gives the IRS the power to go after anyone they disagree with. Now, Barack Obama didn't have to tell the people at the IRS go after conservatives. All of these liberal bureaucrats know to do it. So I believe that we need to overhaul the IRS. We need to have that woman who refused to testify, Lois Lerner, before the House committee. She needs to be held accountable. Eric Holder ought to prosecute her for contempt of Congress. And we need to have conservatives of conviction who will go to Washington. But while we're talking about taxes, we might as well talk about my opponent. Lee, you went to Albany, and on December 7th, 2011, you voted to increase New York State top income tax rate to 8.85%. Now, if you had done nothing on that date, absolutely nothing, that would have reverted to 6.85%. Why didn't you do nothing and let that tax go down? Or did you think that it was better to have a higher tax? I don't understand that. I don't understand why you continue to reauthorize high sales taxes. You continue to reauthorize Suffolk County's sales tax to be at 8.625%. Meanwhile, you vote against Ulster County's similar proposition. So on the issue of taxes, there's only one person in this race who can stand up to Tim Bishop and say, I am consistently against taxes, and that is our campaign for Congress. I will always fight for lower taxes.
Senator Zeldin, your response, 60 seconds.
I mean, honestly, you just lied in so many different ways. But first off, going back to December 7th, I'm actually shocked that you would even suggest that you would have voted against that bill. That bill repealed the MTA payroll tax for 80% of employers. Do you know that every single New Yorker in the entire state of New York has a lower income tax rate than the day that I got elected? Every single New Yorker. You want to tell people you want to have these fancy mail pieces to try to take advantage of the fact that some people maybe are busy working. They can't read every single bill that's up in Albany. So you send a mail piece as if I increased their taxes, and you say it again now? You lie right here in front of everyone at a debate? Every single New Yorker in the entire state of New York has a lower income tax rate than the day I got elected. And you want to say that I voted to raise the sales tax rate? You said in your stuff 3% to 4%, not even knowing. Obviously, you're not from Suffolk, because Suffolk County's sales tax rate has been 4.25% since 2001. Please stop lying to my neighbors.
Jay,
Thank you. Quick response, 15, Mr. Demos. Go.
Yeah, the fact is there are votes, and these votes have consequences. The rate would have fallen to 6.85% if you hadn't voted for that. The sales tax would have voted for 7%. Why would you vote for Ulster County's tax to go down and not for Suffolk County? Makes no sense to me, Lee.
Senator Zeldin, your next question. Would you or would you not support an increase in the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $10.10 an hour? Now, if not, would you have any other plan to another increase? And if so, what kind?
Well, I would not personally vote to raise the minimum wage up to $10.10. I care about our small business owners here who are struggling to make ends meet. If you have a small business owner, he has, say, $30,000 available to pay 2 minimum wage employees. If you raise the minimum wage, that pot of money doesn't get any larger. One person might get more pay, but the other person is going to end up getting maybe less hours or get laid off. We have to, those who are advocating for raising the minimum wage are completely out of touch with the people who are 16, 17 years old living at home. There's nothing wrong with them making the minimum wage as it is. It should be noted that New York's minimum wage is higher than the federal minimum wage. It's actually on the way of getting phased up to $9 an hour. So it's really a fight in other parts of the country. But you have a lot of employers who would be really struggling. There's no doubt that raising the minimum wage ends up resulting in higher unemployment. And I think that this is an area where you have Democrats who are supporting raising it because it polls well. If you call someone up at their home and you ask them, are you in favor of your next-door neighbor making more money than they are right now, we'd all say yes. We're all in favor of our neighbors making more money than they are right now. But, why not raise minimum wage to 15 or 20 or 30, right? Well, that seems to be their logic with the way that they're advocating for certain things down in Washington. Washington is so dysfunctional. There's all this partisan bickering. There's all this dysfunction. They say stuff in sound bites to try to win elections. This president is all politics all the time. I believe that there's a time for government and a time for politics. But this president being all politics all the time, he doesn't want to work with his Republican colleagues across the aisle. He wants to win elections. And this is just another way that he's trying to do that.
I am opposed to any increase in the federal minimum wage. But you know what? Under Lee Zeldin, New York State increased the minimum wage. So he can sit here and tell us all he wants about how he's opposed to it. But the fact is that he voted for it. Now, the minimum wage is a job killer. What it does, it tells employers that if we want to hire someone else, there's going to be a higher cost to doing that. And it prevents employers from innovating, from creating jobs, and from hiring more people. The minimum wage is never intended to be a lifelong position. It's intended to be an entry point. So I would ask Lee, why in the world did you go to Albany and vote to increase the New York State minimum wage? We can talk all we want about how we're conservatives, but if you go and you vote, the fact is that you're going to have conservative principles be the things that govern how we're going to vote. And Lee went up there with his Democratic lobbyists, and he went there with all the liberals, and he went along to get along. I would be the person who would stand up on behalf of our conservative values and fight on behalf of the conservative principles that I believe in.
Gentlemen, this is the time of the debate where you each get to ask each other a question. Mr. George Demos, 2 minutes on the clock. Please ask Senator Lee Zeldin a question.
Sure. Lee, you make about $100,000 a year as a state senator. You also have work at the law firm of Abramowitz and Altshuler and Bernstein in New York City, in Manhattan. And you make they pay you about $100,000 a year at that law firm. My question to you, and I want you to think very carefully before you answer this, is how many days a week do you go into that law firm, and what do you do to earn that money?
Well, thank you for the question. I actually have had the opportunity to work over the course of the last 4 years. You haven't actually earned a dollar of income. You're a full-time candidate. This is your job. You run for office. This is your 5th time running in the last 6 elections. I happen to continue to practice law. I still serve in the Army Reserves. I'm proud to continue serving in the Army Reserves. I drill 1 weekend a month, 2 weeks of the year. And you know what? It's really an honor to continue working for my family. But it's a different experience between us. See, I own a home. I pay property taxes. It's a little bit of a different experience between the two of us. So you're a part-time resident whenever it's time for an election. I'm a full-time resident regardless as to whether or not there's an election. So it's a little bit different experience between the two of us. But I appreciate you trying to make an issue really where there is none.
How many days a week do you go to that?
As far as my time up in the state Senate, I'm very proud to say that through this entire campaign, I have not missed a single vote. And it's very important. My colleagues say, "Wow, what are you doing here? You have a primary going on. You should be campaigning in your district." I said, "I am elected by the residents of the 3rd Senate District to come to Albany and to represent them and make sure that we are passing good bills." And sitting here, here you are trying to spin stuff, and you're not going to be able to buy your own version of facts just because you have all this California Democratic money funding your campaign. The fact of the matter is, if you take the time to read what we are doing up in Albany, I take my job very seriously. I love representing the people of 3rd Senate District. I love calling this my home. Long Island is my home. Okay, Manhattan is yours. Maybe you don't understand what it is to be in this situation, raising a family, trying to make ends meet. You haven't had a job in 4 years.
Thank you,
it's ironic that you're asking me about income.
Senator Zeldin, thank you. Senator Zeldin, please ask Mr. Demos a question.
Well, I own a home here in the 1st Congressional District. I pay property taxes here in the 1st Congressional District. You don't own a home here. There is no tax bill in the entire county of Suffolk that has ever had your name on it. So I would like to know, there are a lot of people here at the studio today. They're listening online or at home, and they want to know. I want to know. We all want to know, what will it take? What do we have to do to get George Demos to finally start paying property taxes here in Suffolk County? We all want to know. What do we have to do to get you to start paying property taxes?
Thank you, Senator. Mr. Demos, please answer the question.
Lee, what's wrong with you? What kind of guy have you become? This is not This is not the guy you used to be. This is your campaign. You're running on the fact that I don't own the home. When I find the right home, and my wife and my new baby, we find it, we'll buy it. But I'll have you know something. I actually do pay property taxes. I just paid $11,500 in Brookhaven property taxes. And you may not know that, but I did, and it would have been lower if it weren't for you and your Albany cohorts. But this is his entire campaign. Throwing mud, making up things. Is this how we're going to defeat Tim Bishop? I'll notice, Jay, that in the last question, he never answered the question. He's a lawyer. He understands the question. The question was, how many days does he go to New York City to work at that Manhattan law firm, and what does he do for that money? Never answered it. The people of Long Island are looking for a fighter. They're looking for someone who won't go along to get along. They're looking for someone who will stand up and defend our conservative principles. He's got all of his facts backwards. He obviously doesn't know that I just paid $11,500 in property taxes, or I don't know who's advising him to say.
There's no tax bill.
Sir?
I don't know who's advising them to say these things. And Lee, whoever you got running your campaign, you got to get a new guy, because you're not going to defeat Tim Bishop by making personal attacks. My campaign has been focused on the issues: Obamacare, taxes, conservative principles. And my opponent's entire campaign is about what street I'm on, what taxes are paid, personal things about my family in California. Of course my family is supporting me. And your family is supporting you too. And I'm sure there are Democrats in your family that are supporting you too. The fact of the matter is, I've always been a conservative. I am running on our principles. I am running on the conservative record. And he's running on his Democrat lobbyist friends in Albany. He's a go-along-to-get-along candidate. He can't defend his liberal record in Albany. So what's he going to do? He's going to attack me personally, attack my family, put my father-in-law in the campaign mailers. Aren't you ashamed of yourself, Lee, for doing that?
Gentlemen, we are at the point now of closing statements. We're going to start with Mr. George Demos. 2 minutes, please, on the clock.
Thank you, Jay, and thank you for the opportunity here to speak to to Long Island News Radio. There's something very wrong in this campaign, and that's Lee Zeldin's voting record in Albany. I could go on and on about the fact that he went to Albany and voted differently than he should have voted. But the fact of the matter is we need a conservative. This entire election is about defeating Tim Bishop. We all agree that Tim Bishop is too liberal and he's been there for too long. He's been there for 12 years. We need a conservative who's going to stand up and defend our conservative principles. It's actually very easy who to support. You support an Albany liberal or a conservative Republican. I've been endorsed by America's mayor himself, Rudy Giuliani, Governor George Pataki. We have strong support across Long Island, and yet my opponent continues to make personal insults and personal attacks. I believe we have to fight for our education here on Long Island. We have to fight for our economy, a strong and vibrant economy here on Long Island. We have to fight for a strong and secure foreign policy. And we have to have a strong and secure national defense. And this is Memorial Day weekend, and we have to fight on behalf of those who sacrificed all on behalf of our nation. We have to fight against wrong-headed immigration reform, and we have to fight for the moral values that we believe in Washington. But all of this isn't going to happen if we have someone as a go-along to get-along candidate. I am the candidate who can defeat Tim Bishop. My opponent stood against Tim Bishop once before, and he was beaten roughly 2-1. He was trounced. So let's not have the same thing happen again and again. Let's put forward a conservative who believes what he says and says what he believes, who believes in the conservative principles, and will always fight against Obamacare and always fight against taxes. This race is about the future of our country. I'm fighting for my baby son, Angelo. When you hold your son, my baby Angelo, you realize you're holding the future of America. And I want to fight for all the Angelos out there, for our children and for our grandchildren, and for a stronger and more secure and safer America. Thank you, Jay.
Senator Lee Zeldin, 2 minutes on your closing statement, sir.
It's been a privilege to serve as a senator and soldier, and I would be honored to continue serving as your next congressman. The best way to change Washington is by changing the people we send there to represent us. I'm running in this Republican primary against a career candidate on his 5th try for Congress who still hasn't bothered to buy a home in our district and has never paid one single penny of property taxes here. Made an allegation, no tax bill. He doesn't work and his only job is running for office. He is so desperate to be elected he will shamefully say absolutely anything to try to score an extra vote. And he's doing it almost entirely with California Democratic money. I'm the only candidate in this race you know and trust. I live here, grew up here, and have been proud to serve my home. This race is about you, the voter, the taxpayer. If you're like me, you are fed up with the direction our nation is heading under this president. You want a representative who understands your concerns, is from here, and represents your values. This election is our opportunity to change Washington our way. Not the Obama version of change, but real change. The Republican primary is 1 month away, and the November election will be here before we know it. I need your help to defeat the Democrats on June 24th and again on November 4th. In the meantime, this Memorial Day weekend, we again pause to honor our nation's brave men and women who paid the ultimate sacrifice in defense of our freedoms and liberties. And please remember, the Republican primary is Tuesday, June 24th, and I'm humbly asking for your vote. Vote for someone who you know, who you trust. Lee Zeldin. I thank all of you. I ask you to visit my website at zeldinforcongress.com. Get involved in our campaign. Call Belinda at 631-569-4848. You can email her at belinda@zeldinforcongress.com. We need volunteers to get our message out. I'm asking for your vote Tuesday, June 24th. Let's take this seat back for us.
Gentlemen, we thank both of you for being here. We urge everybody to go vote. Your amendment right is to do so June the 24th. Thank you.